Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for coming. My name is Joseph Baum. Some of you may have been in contact with me, and we are here today for the online public exhibition for Haroldslea Meadows in Hawley. Some of you may have received our newsletter, and we're so grateful that you can make it here. Before we get started, I'm conscious that some of this software might be new to you, so I just wanted to spend a few moments just explaining how to use it. The first thing to say is this is how you go into full screen mode. By clicking the bottom right icon just in the corner, you will be able to maximize the amount of space so that you can see the information on display today. So if you can do that now, that'd be fantastic. The second thing to say is obviously we want you to ask as many questions as you like. Some of you have been asking questions already, but if you want to ask questions throughout the session, you can do that by using the question icon on the right-hand side. Feel free to start doing that now, and what we will do about halfway through the presentation is have a live Q&A, and that's your chance to put some of those written questions to our team who are here today, and they will try and answer them for you. Any of the ones that we can't answer, we will go back to every single person with all of their questions as soon as possible, ideally before the end of next week. So that's how you ask questions. And we also know that not everyone can be here today, and some of you here may not be able to make it for the whole of the evening because you might want to enjoy the warm weather. So we've got some handouts as well. So we've got, I believe, a copy of the exhibition slides that are available this evening. We've also got the community newsletter that went to the local residents, and they are also on the website. So the community newsletter is on the website. The slides that were available today, they're going to be on the website, and we are also recording this presentation. So a copy of this recording will also go onto the website as well. So that's how the software works. And the final thing to say is thank you for listening to us. Thank you in advance for asking your questions. And we're here because we genuinely want to try and answer those. We want to adapt the proposals where we can, and only then will we look to submit a planning application. And before I just let the team speak about the proposals, I just want to introduce them to you. We've got Billy from Earlswood Homes. You may have met him before. We've got Andrew from Motion, who deals with transport issues. And we've got Tom, who is one of the architects, and that's me. And I'm here to sort of field any questions that you've got today, but also to field questions that you've got in the future as well. So that's enough from me. I'll now hand over to Billy, just to explain a bit more about Earlswood Homes and also why we are here this evening. So over to you, Billy.
Thank you, Joseph. Good evening, everybody. And just to echo Joe's comments, thanks very much for your time this evening. I appreciate it. It's lovely weather out there, so thank you for coming along and sharing half an hour of your evening to hear about the proposals. As Joe said, we're very much at the early stages here. We want to carry out this consultation. We want to hear people's views, and where possible, we want to reflect those in the scheme before we get to submitting our planning application. So hopefully your feedback this evening and the questions you ask can give us some food for thought that we can take away and hopefully reflect positively in the final scheme. Just a bit more, as Joseph said initially, about who we are. Earlswood Homes is very much a bespoke development company. We're not one of the large house builders. We're very much not a house builder that just puts any old house types on any old site. For Earlswood, the business is really about delivering high quality design and tailoring that to each site. So that's very much our ethos. It's about getting the scheme right for the particular site, for the character of that area, and for the community that it sits within. In terms of us as a business, we've been around for about 15 years now, very much a local business. We started life in the borough of Reigate and Banstead. We're still locally based, our office nearby in South Nutfield. And very much a lot of our business and a lot of the homes we build are within the borough of Reigate and Banstead. And over the past few years, we've built about 120 new homes in the borough, including on some some other sites in and around the town of Hawley. But the business is growing, and we do have sites now stretching out towards Sussex, South London, and also in our new regions in East Anglia and Thames Valley. And as I say, the business very much is growing to one that is a focus on quality, both in terms of what we deliver and in terms of how we go about our developments and the planning process. And some of that quality is being recognised. We're an award-winning business, having won awards at the Surrey Property Awards since 2018. And just shown on the slide there are a few examples of our recently completed developments in and around Hawley. So a couple up in Merstham, just north of Redhill, and one recently completed in Reigate, just off Dover's Green Road, called the Greenways. So yeah, just to give a bit of a flavour for who Earlswood Homes are. Next slide, please, Joseph. Just moving now on to the site that we're talking about. So as Joseph said, we've currently named it as Haroldslea Meadows, but the site itself is on the eastern side of Hawley and on the southern side of Haroldslea Drive itself. It is sustainably, accessibly located. It's a short walking distance, about 10 to 15 minutes from Hawley town centre, from the rail station, and from Oakwood School and Langshot School just to the north off of Balcombe Road. So it is a sustainable location. It's ideally located for walking and cycling. There's excellent footpath links and footpath network around the site, and public rights of way all around the countryside on the eastern side of Hawley, and road, pedestrian and cycle links back into the town. So that's really where we're at, and the plan on this just shows accessibility distances to various services. So as I mentioned, the railway station and the conglomeration of dots in the northwest corner of that plan is the town centre. So the range of a wide range of facilities and services available for the site to access nearby. Next slide, please, Joseph. A little bit more about the site. So in total, the site is about 4.5 acres in total. So that's the equivalent, basically, of about 3 football pitches. And it comprises of 2 properties. The first, which is marked on the plan roughly where the 1 and 2 are, is a property number 50 off of Haroldslea Drive. And then to the rear, the diamond-shaped area of land, if you like, is a property called Laburnum, which has a large residential bungalow with a large paddock around it. And those 2 properties comprise the site that we are looking to bring forward this development on. As I say, both are large bungalows. Currently, Laburnum is accessed from a private driveway. However, the proposals are for all of the developments to be accessed directly from a new access off Haroldslea Drive. So that private driveway wouldn't be an access, or certainly not a vehicular access to any development. The site is well screened, visually enclosed by trees and hedgerows on all boundaries, and an area of woodland to the west. And they provide a sense of sort of visual enclosure. They're a very important part of the landscape, and certainly our intention here is to retain those trees as a key part of the scheme. As I mentioned, there are a wide range and network of public rights of way close to the sites, and in particular there is a public footpath running all the way down the southern and eastern boundaries of the site, right along the boundary. So that provides an excellent connection, both further back into town, but also into the wider countryside for recreation and for walks. And they link to the Sussex border path just to the south, so a sort of wider footpath network. Just a few images there. So number 1 shows roughly where the entrance to the site would be, effectively where the existing bungalow is. Number 2 shows just a view towards the rear of the property number 50, looking towards the area of woodlands to the rear. And numbers 3 and 4 just show the paddock area adjacent to Laburnum, and looking towards the sort of tree canopy and the tree belts which line the edges of the site. Next slide, please, Joseph. So just a sort of brief introduction to where the proposals are at and what our proposals are. Tom, who Joseph introduced initially, who's our architect, will say a little bit more about the design, the evolving design for the scheme in the following slides. But just to reiterate, the proposals are very much at the early stage, and it's our hope that this public consultation and the views of yourselves as you know, key residents and local stakeholders and part of the community will hopefully help to shape the final scheme before the application is submitted to the council. The proposals at the moment are for a scheme of approximately 45 new homes in total, accessed from Haroldslea Drive with a new access created in place of what is the existing bungalow of number 50. That then drops down into the site, and with the majority of the developments being on what is currently Laburnum and the paddocks that surround it. The sketch proposals have been designed around extensive open space, with the key intention in mind of retaining those strong tree belts around the site, which are an important part of the landscape, an important part of the screening of the countryside and of neighbouring properties. As I mentioned, the development would access onto Haroldslea Drive, the existing bungalow being demolished, and that would make way for a new road which would be designed to relevant highway standards. And you know, given the benefits that the site has in terms of its connections to the footpath network, a key part of the design is providing links to that footpath network in order to promote walking, cycling back into town, and also access to the countryside for future residents. And in terms of some of the sort of technical aspects of the scheme, it would incorporate a comprehensive sustainable drainage scheme to manage surface water and ensure that that doesn't cause a risk of flooding for neighbouring properties. Next slide, please, Joseph, and I'll hand over to Tom.
Thanks, Billy. Yeah, hi, I'm Tom James. I'm the owner-director of Amiga Architects based in Surrey. And we've been asked to look at the project on behalf of Earlswood Homes. Billy's given you a good sort of rundown of the basic setup with the site and the boundaries and all that kind of thing, and how it's accessed. And I'm just going to sort of follow up with maybe a bit more about central character and what we're trying to create here, really. I think what's interesting is there's actually a development a bit further down the road on Haroldslea Drive, which is quite a similar approach really to this, in that an existing house has been sort of demolished to allow an access through to a field at the back. And I think that's quite a fairly successful development. It looks quite good, and it sits in with the landscape, etc. So we sort of used that as a kind of a starting point. But what I did want to try and do here was, whilst it's well screened and you know, you can't actually see it really very much from the road, I wanted to create some there that has a sense of place in itself. So like Billy said, it's not just some houses put in a field behind the main road. It actually becomes a place of its own, in a way that both, you know, future residents who might live here and people who live in the area would be happy to sort of walk through and you know, enjoy some of the spaces that are created. So really one of the big features that we've tried to incorporate is a central green. You know, sometimes these are called doorstop greens or village greens. It's probably a bit grand to call it a village green, but it'll be a large green space in the heart of the development, which would hopefully create a really nice focal point. And what that allows us to do, sorry to go back a slide, what that allows us to do is front the buildings onto this open space and create this kind of sense of place. And then the remainder of the site is really about how it interacts with its neighbours and its boundaries. So we know that there's a public right of way that runs along the eastern boundary and the southern boundary. And again, we're really conscious we want to try and interact with that public right of way. And often what's good about these new developments is that, you know, that's quite a long stretch of unoverlooked footpath at the moment. And with this proposal, we would hope that the houses will then now provide what we call natural surveillance over that footpath. And at the southern end of the site, they're facing outwards towards the open space to the south. and overlooking that footpath link, which I believe is fairly well used. So yeah, I think that's a really positive aspect that we're going to link into that, but also overlook it and provide some natural surveillance to that existing use, which is a benefit to the surrounding area. What else I've tried to do is really minimise impact on the boundaries. There aren't really that many boundaries with existing properties, but there is one that's quite close to the boundary to the sort of southwest. And again, if you look at the sort of layout and the form of the sketch here, we've tried to create a gap within the development, like a visual gap, and only put side elevations of properties in this location, so it really does minimise the impact on that existing property. So they would actually look through towards that open space in the centre, and you know, you're talking a good 60-70 metres or so before you get to the first sort of building, which is quite a nice open feature for that existing property that's on the side there. We've also got a sort of little, what we call a courtyard, fob courtyard on the that's further down that boundary, which is again just presenting side elevations of barn type buildings to that boundary rather than sort of houses and gardens, etc. So we really thought about the impact on neighbouring properties there, and as I say, trying to create this kind of within a relatively small area, you know, quite a nice sense of place and a character of its own. In terms of the buildings themselves, well, it's a very traditional approach to the architecture. You know, there's a rich history of architectural styles that are found in this area. You know, and we looked to go down that route of, you know, red brick, maybe a mix of sort of grey tiles and terracotta tiles on the roofs, perhaps the use of chimneys to help break up the roof lines, some dormers. There'd be nothing higher in terms of building height than 2.5 storey, which is basically where you have accommodation within the roof. And again, we feel that where you've got the large open space in the centre of the site, that can handle the slightly higher buildings of the 2.5 storey, because often if you have slightly higher buildings, you need to have space around them. It's when they're quite close together, they can appear quite cramped. But I think here it works pretty well around that central village green. And then, yeah, the sort of lower density, larger detached houses towards the edges that'll mitigate that impact onto the open space. And, you know, a lot of sort of blackboarded barn type buildings, turning corners and sort of really giving it that more rural feel. And as much as possible, trying to tuck the parking away from the main road. Now, I'm sure there'll be lots of questions about parking. Obviously, we're going to try and hit the standards that are provided to us by the local authority. That's probably the best way we can deal with parking. But rest assured, there will be enough parking spaces on this site for the amount of units there are here. Where possible, most houses will have an on-plot parking space next to their actual house, whether it's via a car barn or a garage. And then when the ones at the central green will have 2 parking areas to the side, and actually what that allows us to do is create a kind of visual link through to the footpath that runs along the east side as well, to really enhance that overlooking and that sense that it's part of the wider community rather than just a backland development type approach. Yeah, I think that's probably a pretty good summary of the design approach, and I'll hand over to Andrew, I believe, now to give you a summary on transport.
Thank you, Tom. Yes, Andrew Whittingham, Motion Director based in Guildford. I just really wanted to spend a few minutes bringing you up to date in terms of where we are in developing the sort of transport and highways. And first thing to say really is that we've had sort of preliminary discussions with Surrey County Council as the highway authority, and they've mentioned a few points to us which we're investigating. So one, for example, you've heard previous speakers talk about the footpaths, the footways and bridleways in the area. So we're planning to meet their rights of way officer soon to discuss that and if there's any improvements that can be made. We've talked to them about the access arrangements that you've heard about, the highway access. They've agreed that in principle, and we've actually had a safety audit on that as well, just to make sure that there's nothing untoward about it, and that's come back very positive. So that's sort of the access arrangements. I just wanted to mention a couple of other things. They've asked that we prepare a transport statement to accompany a future application in the normal course of events, and so we will be doing that using survey work, traffic data work, etc. And also a travel plan just to set out how we intend to encourage people to, new residents to use what's called active travel. So that's the walking and cycling part of travel. Just to reinforce the point that we've looked very carefully at the parking requirements according to Reigate and Banstead standards to make sure we are in accordance with them, not only for residents, but applying the requirements for visitor parking as well, and of course also cycle parking. So that's been a very positive discussion with Surrey. Overall, they have no objection in principle, and we're working with them and of course yourselves to make sure that we encapsulate everything that we need to in the transport work. Thank you very much. And over to Billy.
Thank you, Andrew. So just back to me to summarise some of the sort of key aspects and key features of the scheme. As I explained earlier, our emerging proposals at this stage are for up to 45 homes. 30% of those will be designated as affordable housing, which is in line with Reigate and Banstead's adopted policy requirements. So that's a form of housing designed to help those who cannot access market housing and don't have the incomes to do so. The scheme is very much being designed with a focus towards smaller homes and smaller family homes, really designed to help young people to get on the housing ladder, to help growing families take that next step up, but also an opportunity for older residents to downsize but stay within the area which I'm sure they love and the communities that they're part of. As Tom mentioned, new open space and particularly that village green at the heart of the development is a very much a key aspect of the scheme, which would be available to both future residents but also existing residents, being linked directly into those surrounding footpaths, which provide access to the nearby countryside, but would offer an opportunity for people to walk through the open space, whether they live on the site or whether they live elsewhere. And finally, in terms of local infrastructure, we absolutely recognise that that's a valid concern, and that it's important that local facilities and local infrastructure is ready to support the new homes that are provided, not just on this development, but across Hawley and the wider area. So the scheme will make contributions towards local infrastructure paid to the council. We anticipate that there will be in the region of £750,000 of contributions to the council to enable them to fund improvements to schools, to roads, to doctors' surgeries, but also, as Andrew mentioned, we're in discussions with the county council about specific highways improvements that we can make and that we would make, including improvements to the surrounding footpaths to make them more usable, more attractive walking routes, but also to Haroldslea Drive and to any surrounding roads that may be affected by the development. So those discussions are ongoing, but it gives a flavour that the scheme absolutely will be designed to ensure that local infrastructure can keep pace with the new homes. Next slide.
Thank you very much, Billy, and thanks very much to the team for sort of presenting the information. If I can just ask the team to turn your webcams on, just so that the residents can see you and that they know that you're real human beings. Fantastic. And thanks very much to everyone who's been asking the questions. I should say, unfortunately, we won't have time to answer every single one just because there are so many, but that's my job to sort of pick these up and make sure that we've answered all of them for you. But I will kick off with probably one of the key questions that residents have, which is about flooding and the proximity to any flood zones. So perhaps the first question, if I may put it to you, Billy, is essentially, is there a flood risk on this site? And that's a question from Craig. And tied to that is a question from Neil, who's asking what measures will be put in place to prevent flooding after the development. If you could just perhaps clarify that, please, Billy.
Certainly, thank you, Joseph. So yeah, the site itself is largely in flood zone 1. So that's land which is considered to be the least risk of flooding, or the lowest risk of flooding. There is a small part of the site towards the frontage with Haroldslea Drive, which is identified as being within flood zone 2. So it's moderately more at risk of flooding. In terms of the scheme we've put together, we've very much been mindful of flooding. None of the new homes are proposed to be on land at risk of flooding, so all of the homes are in flood zone 1. And actually, by demolishing the existing bungalow at number 50, it'll actually result in a fewer homes being on land at risk of flooding. In terms of how we will manage flood risk moving forward, absolutely, that's a fundamental part of the scheme. As I mentioned earlier, the proposals will include a comprehensive sustainable drainage system, and really what that will be designed to do is manage surface water runoff from the site, so that once the development's completed, the amount of runoff into the surrounding ditches and to the surrounding network is no greater than in its current greenfield form. So it seeks to manage flood risk so that there wouldn't be a greater impact on the surrounding area, and certainly wouldn't be a greater risk of flooding to neighbouring properties. And that's most likely to take the form of sort of underground storage tanks, which then hold the water and enable it to be discharged into that surrounding ditch network at a very controlled rate in the event of a high rainfall or a flooding event. One of the other points I think to mention is the surrounding ditches that sort of are along the boundaries of the site. In their current state are fairly poorly maintained. They are quite heavily silted up. They haven't been subject to any sort of significant maintenance for a number of years by the looks of it. And certainly as part of the development, but also from an ongoing perspective and into the long term, the proposals will provide a better management and maintenance regime for those ditches, so that over time and over the long term, they are better able to perform their function in terms of both storing water, but also conveying it away from the area. So absolutely, we absolutely acknowledge flooding is an important concern, and drainage is an important concern, and the scheme has very much been designed to do that. And Andrew's colleagues at Motion are the experts that are helping us with that particular aspect.
I'm glad you mentioned Andrew, because I think the next question is probably for him, which is probably the main question that is coming through from some of the feedback that we were already getting from the community, which is firstly the access itself. Maybe you can just flesh that out. And Tess was asking, is there any rationale behind another exit road, just because that might put a lot of pressure on Haroldslea Drive? And then the wider point, which I think residents are concerned about, is the sheer volume of cars and traffic flows in the surrounding area, both during construction, but also, I suppose, once complete and you've got 45 new homes. Andrew, if you could perhaps come back to us on that, if that's okay.
Yeah, of course. So on the first point about access arrangements, normally for a development of this scale, you would only expect sort of one point of access. It's not until you get far higher would you consider a second point of access, to the hundreds, so to speak. So we're very comfortable that one point of access is appropriate. And as I mentioned earlier, it will be a good access. It's designed to the normal standards in terms of sort of visibility displays to make sure that it's a safe access, it doesn't inconvenience anybody. And as I mentioned, the county council are happy with that. So the short answer really is that I don't think there is another opportunity or need to have an additional point of access. On the second point about traffic flows, absolutely. We need to quantify that for the planning application and the transport statement that we will prepare. We've already done a survey to understand not only vehicle movements but also pedestrians, cycles and equestrians, because they're obviously an important part of this location. And what we do is quantify the additional traffic to make sure that it's not onerous in terms of how much traffic is going up and down Haroldslea Drive, but also to understand any impact at the junction. And that's what we are doing in discussion with the county, and we will be presenting in the transport statement. But having said all that, you know, we're comfortable that yes, there will be a sort of small increase, but it's not such a big increase that it will cause any problems, we believe, at the junction or along Haroldslea Drive. And sorry, I just remembered there's a third question that was asked, which is in terms of construction, which is obviously a very good point. What we are doing is making sure that the access and the internal arrangements are designed to accommodate construction vehicles within the site. But more specifically, it's the usual practice that a construction management plan will be requested to accompany an application, and to make sure really that any concerns are understood and dealt with prior to construction taking place. Thank you.
And that construction management plan, I think, also covers sort of noise and disruption as well, I believe.
It's relatively wide range.
In mind.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. If I just stick with you just for another question, if I may, which was another question that came through was about encouraging sort of alternative modes of transport, and we mentioned that we would seek to do that at Haroldslea Meadows. Is there anything specific that we're working on with the council, or something that we would want to pursue quite quickly? How would we encourage that? Is a question that's come from Carol.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. And really, the key to this is, as I mentioned earlier, encouraging alternate active travel. So, and because the site is so well located to encourage walk, cycle, travel, you know, we think the key is to make sure that the existing footways, footpaths, and bridleways, you know, if they've got a bit overgrown and need maintaining or better surfacing, then that's something we're keen to do. And that's why we've got a meeting coming up with the rights-of-way officer from the county to, you know, to understand their viewpoint and representations perhaps they've had from residents over potential improvements that can be made. But also, I mean, we haven't mentioned buses. You'll be familiar with the fact that the bus stops are quite near to Haroldslea Drive, easy walking distance to encourage the use, and they're good, relatively good services. So that all gets pulled together basically in what we call a travel plan, which again is another document that accompanies the application, sets out how we will encourage that sort of travel, and it's something that's you know, put forward to the new residents to encourage them to do that.
Okay, thank you, Andrew. Billy, if I can come to you, I think one of the things that was interesting is, you know, obviously we're talking about up to 45 homes, but it might be worth explaining sort of what that looks like in terms of housing mix. One of the questions was, for example, you know, are we looking at potentially bungalows? Are we looking at all 4-bedroom? What is there a mix, and what is that mix?
Yep, thank you, Joseph. Certainly, I can cover that off. I mean, at this stage, we're still in the process of refining and finalising that mix, so there is an opportunity to tweak it. But certainly, what we've done so far is seek to reflect the local council's evidence of what is the housing need, and that's very much towards smaller smaller homes and smaller family homes to help people get on the ladder and take that next step rather than larger homes. Broadly speaking, at the moment, the emerging proposals that we've been working on, around 10% of them are one-bedroom units, so those will most likely be apartments. Just over a quarter are two bedrooms. That'll be a mixture of houses and a small number of apartments. And just over half of them will be three-bedroom units, so they will all be houses, and the remainder, which I think is about 12–15%, is going to be four-bedroom houses. So, as I say, it's certainly not designed to be large executive homes. It's about meeting housing need in its broadest sense. And as I mentioned before, a proportion of those 30% of the homes will be designated affordable housing. So that will be allocated and managed by the local council. It will be homes for rent or homes for discounted or subsidised sale to help people who can't afford market housing get on the housing ladder and get into home ownership. So the scheme has very much been designed to try to meet all aspects of housing need. Bungalows isn't something we've considered as yet, but certainly if there's evidence of a strong need and demand for them, it's something that Tom and I can have a discussion about and see if there's opportunities to work that in as the scheme develops, if there's a need for them.
Okay, and if I could just stick with you on the final question, Billy, which is a sort of, because I'm trying to take these in groups, so lots of people are asking similar sorts of questions. Someone wanted to know specifically, at this stage, can we provide a breakdown of the figure that we would provide by way of a contribution? And one thing that I suppose isn't necessarily clear at this stage is that contribution to local infrastructure. Are we talking a direct contribution to the town council? Well, can you just remind us what the figure is and sort of what breakdown that would be, if that's okay?
Yeah, sure, no problem. So based on a sort of broad analysis of the scheme we're developing at the moment, the total contributions are likely to be in the order of £750,000 so 750 to 800,000 pounds. In terms of providing a breakdown, that's difficult to do simply because the mechanism which it will be collected through is something called the Community Infrastructure Levy, which is managed by the local council, but effectively it just means they take a sum of money and then they are responsible for choosing how that's best spent, what there's the most need for in the local area. So it's unlikely that we'll be required to provide a sort of broken down sum for each element. It will simply be we provide a sort of global figure towards infrastructure, and then the borough council and the town council are responsible for spending that. And in terms of the split, I think I'm right in saying it's about 85% of the money is the responsibility of the borough council to spend, and then 15% of it comes back very much to the town council to spend on particular local projects that they might be aware of or looking to deliver. So yeah, it's difficult to provide a breakdown, but hopefully that gives a flavour for it. And as I say, the Community Infrastructure Levy, certainly in my experience, it is used by the council to fund all sorts of infrastructure. So it might be expansions to schools, it might be providing new places that are doctor's surgery, it could be improving local roads or extending a bus route. So a whole range of infrastructure, but really it's up to the council to spend on what they see as most important and most needed by the community and residents.
Thank you. Thanks, Billy, and thanks, Andrew. Sorry we weren't able to ask you a question, Tom, but maybe next time, perhaps. But no, thank you all for your questions. I can see that there are still some coming through. I will make it my job to come back to each and every one of you as soon as possible. But if I can ask the team to take your webcams off, if that's okay. Thank you very much. Thanks as well, Tom. Right, so I think it's probably worth just talking about the next steps. So obviously we've got the event this evening. Thank you very much for coming. Thanks for asking your questions. We don't just want questions, we also want feedback, your genuine thoughts about how we can make this better. The deadline that we've set is the 17th of September. You can do that in a number of ways. So we've got a survey at the end of this exhibition, We've also got the feedback form that you may have seen within the newsletter that was delivered to you. And then there's also the website, so that will ensure that anyone can go online and fill that survey in. And we really want some genuine feedback so that we can improve the design and we can help Tom and the team to design something that's really, really good. And then we'll look to submit an application in October this year. If we stick to the timescales, then we'd be looking at a determination by the local council by early 2022. And if that application is successful, then construction we would look to start construction at the end of 2022. But as I said, the most important thing in the short term is that you send through the feedback, because we do want to listen to you. We do want you to have your say. And there are the 3 ways there that I've mentioned that you can do that. Catherine mentioned, Catherine, if you're still here, you mentioned the recording of this exhibition. I can confirm that this is all being recorded. So what we will do is upload this recording onto the website tomorrow, and then we will send that to everybody who has signed up for website updates, and we'll send it to the town council. We want to make sure that as many people as possible can see it. And then for those who don't have access to the internet, we're writing to you. We're happy to talk on the phone. I'm happy to talk on the phone. If you would like a copy of these slides, or if you know someone who doesn't have access to the internet, we can do that as well. We can post copies to you. But for now, I just want to say thank you. I just want to say thanks to everybody. Thanks to the team. And yes, please, if you can, just take some time to fill in this survey that I'm going to send to you right now. And yeah, please get in touch with my contact details there if there's any other questions that you've got. So thank you very much and have a very good evening. Take care. Bye.